Welcome to Simon and Whiton, the podcast at the intersection of business, media, and politics. I'm Christian Whiton, former diplomat and finance guy, joined as always by co-host Mark Simon, a longtime media executive and Asia business guy. Today, lots to talk about, Mark, starting with Evergrande, which has moved markets, caused a significant decrease on Monday and continued turbulence since then. Everyone seems to be asking, you have this Chinese behemoth. Estimates vary as to what size and impact it has on the Chinese market and what impact it would have on the economy back here or the broader stock market. You've heard numbers of $300 billion of exposure. I don't know where that number is coming from. And a lot of people speculating as this company fails to meet its obligations, its debt payment obligations, whether it's going to get a bailout from the Chinese government and what that would look like. You did business in this part of the world and continue to for a very long time. What do you think's going on here, and what do you think the Chinese are going to do?
I think the overriding story is demographics and just overbuilding. A lot of free money, a lot of cheap money for the last 15, 20 years. Evergrande just benefited from that. As I've said, the greatest economist ever is probably the CFO of Evergrande, who's taking them into this position because now he does not only do the banks own the problem, but now the Chinese government and the Communist Party of China owns the problem. So I don't know if that group's life is going to be good or they're going to be in jail forever, but you got to give them credit for actually getting that much money out of people. I don't even know if it's 300 billion. I always worry when you name a number 300 billion and the people on the other side of it don't push back. In other words, if it was 200 billion, you could be sure you'd hear from the Chinese or Evergrande, oh, it's only 200 billion. No, it's 300 billion plus, and we have no idea where that's going to go. Look, I get really excited about this in one way. The U.S. system is built to fail. We have failures everywhere. We do commercials with Michael Jordan about how many times we fail. Businesses fail. The whole thing that happens here is you fail and you restart, but that cleanses the system. The Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese system is not meant to have failures. They do not put it in the mix. Everything's supposed to succeed. And then what happens is everything's been succeeding quite well, so they can absorb a few failures. I don't know if they absorb a failure this big for two reasons. First of all, it is so huge. Secondly, and I think it's really a big deal, is who else is in trouble. We saw another property company of similar, not size, but of, basically still 40 or $50 billion, lost 80% of their capital yesterday. In other words, their price dropped 87% on the market. We've seen the Hong Kong market. Henderson Land took a big hit on this. Other people are taking hits all across the marketplace. And that's because essentially I think we don't believe that the Chinese have a plan to fail. They don't have it in their system. I mean, you look in 2008, 2009, there was somewhat of a idea, okay, this is a giant failure, but we'll come out the other side. I'm not sure the Marxist-Leninist Party of the CCP thinks that way. So how do I see this liquidation? I think basically whether it's 300 billion, 400 billion, 500 billion, right across the top, everybody's taking a haircut, probably half their heads are getting taken off. Say that takes it down in half. Everybody's going to lose something. All the accrued interest payments will be considered capital payments right away. So that people, that's all gone. Then we're going to start having people being forced to take assets, worthless assets, and have that as your payment or your collateral. You'll get to sign up for that. So you'll get a shop, or you'll get a piece of dirt, or you'll get whatever it is on the valuation that the Chinese Communist Party puts on it. So that's going to be even worse. And then the final thing is, there is going to be, I find it ridiculous to think there is going to be some significant hits for some of the foreign investors, Goldman, SoftBank, JP Morgan. A lot of people here are going to be holding the bag. Now, does that mean anything if Goldman loses 11 billion or 12 billion? I'm not sure. You never know. They just bounce back. It's only the shareholders' money for them. But I do think that we're going to see the Chinese do a bailout in their own way, but it's not going to look like the bailouts we've seen in the past. There's going to be a tremendous amount of pain, and I believe that's not by choice. I believe that they know that they have an entire system out there that if people saw the big guy getting bailed out, everybody else would be getting right in line too. In other words, they'd be looking for some money. And, you can get to $1 trillion pretty quickly if you're doing these types of real estate bailouts. It's hard for people to really grasp. New York City, what is New York City? New York City square foot rental. I was watching Fox Business the other day, and the young woman Dagan McCow was saying, $2,000 a square foot or something like that. I mean, Shanghai can be up to $8,000 a square foot. Really? Is it really worth that much on a global scale? And then you go into Guangzhou and you find stuff at $4,000 a square foot. So the thing is, there could be some real adjustments coming, and when you have so much of your wealth in the country tied up in this, it's going to be a bad scene. It's going to be a really bad scene.
Right. And I think that's the big question is too, whether it's beyond real estate, that China has this well-earned reputation of having a tremendous amount of zombie debt, of capital that's allocated because you are in good graces with the party, because you are a state-owned enterprises or you work closely with one. And so if all of that starts being called into question, and of course, over years, you've had U.S. exposure increase, then, what really is the consequence? Let's circle back to China in just a second, but I'm curious with, you saw this spook the overall market in the U.S., even things, it was a broad sell-off. It extended even to some commodities, which are being pushed up by inflation and probably will be continued to be pushed up. But you had a broad impact on the U.S. market. Curious what you think. You have companies like Robinhood, this darling of fintech that has been a pioneer in zero commission trades, so free trades. Essentially, you then ask, well, how do they make their money? They make their money off of market makers, the difference between the bid and the ask. So it's a real question of whether these young people who have started trading in the pandemic, who've joined up with Robinhood, who think they're getting free trades when in fact they may be paying through the nose on the bid-ask spread, whether they're really getting a deal. But here's a company that's valued at $35 billion. Keep in mind, Citibank, I think, is about 130. They have only about 500 million in revenue. They have the same amount in losses. And this is mirrored by another company, Revolut, which just said it's going to do the same thing. It's a fintech company from Europe, same crazy valuation, 33 billion, same amount of losses, going to come in and do zero commission trade. So, if there is a sustained downturn, I mean, is this sort of starts to look like a house of cards that, as in 2000, all of these people who think that this is a video game and who win more than they lose just because the market has been going up so much. Do you think this is a bubble?
Look, here's my advice to the major shareholders of Robinhood. Take 20 cents on the dollar, go away, change your name, hide for 5 years, and then people will forget about this. This is insane. $35 billion for an app that basically rips people off with the spread. I mean, that's all this thing is. I have met more young people who think that I have guys ask me questions about, well, what do you think about this, Mr. Simon? Or what do you think about that? And I said, I'm not smart enough to think about these things. What do you think about the latest stock here? Look, we've done one thing. There are certain things that are a mistake. We've made trading probably too easy. In other words, when I trade for some of the people that I work for and for some of the clients that I work for, I have an institutional certification. In other words, I'm supposed to know what I'm doing. The problem you have now is you get somebody, they get a Robinhood app, and they think we're trading 6-7 times a day. And it's really just down to the thing. It's the old thing. When you get in the taxi cab in Hong Kong, when I was in Hong Kong, when the taxi driver was talking to you about the latest stock market, that was like a sell sign to a lot of guys. When you have 19-year-olds and 20-year-olds, and my favorite the other day was I saw a guy, I'm not kidding you, I was at Starbucks, I saw a guy, and he was playing on Robinhood, and he was talking to his friend that he was going to buy 1.5 shares of Google. He was going to buy a half share of Google. And I'm like, come on. I'm glad people are investing. I am not putting that down. But I really think we've just made it so easy that everybody walks in the door. I'm not looking for the days of the return to Charlie Sheen where somebody is cold calling you or something like that. but it's just ridiculous. And yeah, a bubble's coming. It's here. These fintech companies, there's no way. I was looking around the SaaS sector, services software sector the other day, looking at stuff with 97 P&Es, no P&E because it's valued this high. I get very nervous. There's no underlying business. There's nothing there. And I'm with Robinhood. I mean, I see it as an app. Is an app really worth that much? They don't offer anything except for a spread. And the problem they're going to have is that Charles Schwab's of the world and the other people will find a way to duplicate this. And again, they'll be lucky if they get the college kid. Robinhood will get the college kids and the other folks again. But anybody who's got more than $30,000 or $40,000 in their account, they're going to probably go to somebody reputable, TD Waterhouse, Charles Schwab, and just basically, pay to get that. And also, I saw Robinhood the other day. It seems to me they're trying to sell you everything from, music to Netflix subscriptions to everything else. I'm like, all right, you're a financial app. Be a financial app. Don't be everything else. But I'm telling you, if I got a valuation like that and I was Robinhood, I was the guys, I would sell out tomorrow. I would find somebody out,
Right.
I'd get a fake doctor's note or something like that, and I would leave. I would depart, take
Absolutely.
your money and run.
Take the money and run. No, that's right. In fact, I don't short that many stocks, but I did try to short Robinhood from my little old E-Trade account. And the going rate previously, this is before Monday, was 70%, roughly APR. Which means you can, in fact, borrow to short, but people are expecting this to go on. Options are priced quite high, put options, of course. And then I looked at shorting it again on Monday as the market declined, and E-Trade was unable to find anyone willing to take the other side of that bet. So the market seems savvy to this.
It's the old saying: you walk into a room and you can't figure out who the sucker is. It's you, and I'm just telling you, it's just I am constantly shocked by the ego of people who think that they can somehow time the market or beat the market, or they have some insight on something that somebody else doesn't have. There's a Hong Kong saying, a Chinese saying, like, there's no such thing as a frog in the road. The idea being is the city's very crowded. People like frog. It tastes good. There's nobody, just a frog just doesn't appear in the road and nobody else sees it. You know what I'm saying? In other words, so there's no, it's basically, there's no eureka moment that just one person has. You know what I'm saying? I mean, the people who have been constantly having these eureka moments are the quants and people like that who figure out some technical way around the market. But the idea that you can pick this versus that or this and that, maybe you get lucky, probably you don't.
Right. There's the economist joke where you may get lucky. Two economists are walking down the sidewalk and they pass a $20 bill on the ground and just walk right past it. And one asks the other, it's like, why didn't you pick that up? It's like, well, if you believe in perfect markets, then it would have already been picked up. I have lots more economist jokes too, incidentally, where that came from. Switch to travel and the business of travel. You had early in the pandemic, Donald Trump put a ban on most travel from Europe, most tourist, non-essential travel, which captured business travel as well. At the end of his administration, close to the end, he actually lifted that ban. But in comes Joe Biden, who ran on taking COVID much more seriously and being an expert on this. So slapped the ban on tourism from Europe again. And of course, we've had problems with the Canadian and Mexican borders being closed, sort of, where you could fly across them, but you couldn't drive across them. Now the Biden administration has finally said Europeans can come here. This was after they were very upset because they started letting Americans in some countries in spring. And now everyone will be able to come if they've been vaccinated and take a simple antigen test, 3 days or fewer before travel. What do you make of this? Is this too little too late? Do you think Biden has a coherent plan to bring back the travel industry? Is this going to help?
I'd be as interested to hear what you have to say, because I know that you actually, work with travel related companies and, destinations. And so, you just see the massive frustration. I went up to Purdue University this weekend to see my son. So we flew up to Chicago. The planes were packed. I mean, I must say it was really encouraging. The airport was busy. Newark was busy. Chicago was very, very busy on the way back. But it was just ironic because the Notre Dame game was up there. And of course, everybody was coming back on the plane in their dreadful Notre Dame outfits. And, what happened is that you're sitting there thinking to yourself, okay, this was just 90,000 people together in a stadium going screaming, just expelling everything everywhere. No mask, no nothing. You know what I'm saying? Beer, having a good time, bars, everything. Then they have to go back, get on a plane, mask up. And if they so much as look at each other without a mask in an airport, you're put in jail. I really think the problem with the travel is as usual, the government is so far behind in everything. I think the Europeans are completely right to be upset with the U.S. Completely right. They opened up. We're trying to get the economy going. Tourism is a much larger part of their economy, going from our way to their way than the other side. And then Biden just comes in and boom, because it's domestic political consumption. Because again, it gets down to this whole thing where they don't care. In other words,
Right.
I really don't think they care. There are people being hurt, and I think this is really going to be an issue that we see, our theme that we see going for the next couple of years, where basically elites just say, "Oh, this works for me. I'm fine." And I was watching you on Fox Business this morning, and you guys had a great segment about the San Francisco mayor. She's just like, I'm going to do what I want to do when I want to do it, but all you other guys are going to wear masks. Okay. I'm going to do this how I want it to happen. You guys are going to wear masks. The travel industry is the one industry that I think probably doesn't need the protection that they think it needs, because people are naturally spaced out. People are going different places, but the rules and the regulations make it just so difficult to figure out what's going to happen. In Canada, where it's pretty well known that I oversee a small hotel group up there. In Canada, we're on the border there. We don't know what to tell people. Get a test. You have to come over. This is what you do. All these things. Once you have a person have one question for you, it throws everything off. You know what I'm saying? If you're an unvaccinated person, you can't come in. That's, I guess, the way it is. But you're killing a lot of jobs. And I think, in my mind, that we're gonna see a lot more hardship coming into this fall, because the tourism season is kind of ending. In other words, probably by really end of October, middle of October, people aren't traveling on tourism anymore. So again, it's going to be a nice cold winter once again, another cold winter.
It's a shame because, I mean, first of all, the delay in getting to this point, when people come here from abroad to travel, that counts as a U.S. export. We're essentially exporting
That's
service.
right.
So Americans go to Europe, as they did in significant numbers this summer. Great for Europe, bad for us. And this idea that this is something that should be obvious even to bureaucrats that they don't. The idea of just taking a pause in your business for 2 years, and that waiters won't go and get other jobs or enter other professions, that people, especially skilled ones, people who do it really well. And, that goes through the whole food chain, tour guides, people putting capital into buses, into cars and vans, into airplanes and things like that. This also, even though it may be solving itself a bit with U.S. Europe travel, and that just shows, frankly, how U.S., North America, Europe, the Middle East are way ahead of East Asia, which is supposed to be the most energetic, capitalist, creative part of the world, not including China. And yeah, with Taiwan, who I would like to go, with Japan, it's not just that I can't go, even though I'm double vaccinated and willing to take a test before and after and jump through the hoops. It's that there's no plan in place. I don't even know if I'll be able to in February and March. And that's, it's like the travel industry has so little political power. It's somewhat shocking.
That's actually incredibly true. You were just in Europe. I mean, what was the attitude like in Europe compared to, is it as bad? Or I don't think it is. What I've been told.
It's laid back. It's like the middle of the U.S. You know, if you're going through Denver or Dallas or Chicago, you know, of course, when you're in an airport, you have these mask rules, but it seems normal. It seems busy. People are comfortable. And still, if you go to, I haven't been to New York in a long time now, but often to Washington and the West Coast on occasion, it's still set back. So I was in Croatia. It's Southern Europe. It's New Europe. You know, the staff, probably because of the chain that they're part of at the hotel, are wearing masks, although sometimes they just wear it as the chin diaper, not actually doing anything. And, you know, all of the guests, you can tell the newbies who just got there, just got off the plane, they're wearing masks, but everyone else is dispensed with them. It's an open and airy place. And it was fine, very welcoming. A whole lot of Americans. Croatia announced way before the EU they were bringing Americans in. They did not care, or they care, but not that much. And both United and Delta put on nonstop flights, although we actually transited through Frankfurt, which was no problem at all. Also, you know, it was in Czech Republic. That's a tiny bit more buttoned down, but these places have largely returned to work. And there's, you know, a factor here that no one is talking about seemingly on left and right, and that we are probably past apogee, past the peak of Delta wave. If you look at the 7-day moving average,
yeah, that's true.
Very true. You look at it, there's a nice bell curve, and we are on the right side of that curve now, going down. Deaths trail by 7 to 10 days, so they're sort of leveling off, which is good. You know, it sort of makes you wonder what the Democrats and the Karens of the world are going to do when they don't have this to worry about.
I am a firm believer that when it comes to the travel industry, as you said, very good point, not much political power. Unfortunately, in a lot of communities, it's seen as something they can take or leave. And I think also they look at that labor as basically, you know, not important labor. They're not important parts of the community. But I have to say, I was really somewhat amazed at just the irony of 80,000 people in a stadium, you know, going crazy. And then, you know, you have to get back on an airplane and everybody has to put it back on while you're in a closed area and all that stuff. I said, okay, whatever, you know, but there is this dissonance in the community, and it's a real problem for us. It's a real problem in the terms that we have now got, you know, a small group of people. And I think it's a small group of people, whether it's the health professionals, not the doctors and nurses, but the health professional community, and the certain members of the political left, who essentially have decided that this is a tool that they're not going to give up. And I use that. It's a tool. It's a tool to control people. Right. It's a tool for power. Australia would be fascinating. I mean, I'm just what I follow. Basically they're almost open about it. We need you to do this. You have to do this. You have to do that. It's like, what am I, 5 years old? You know, wear a mask in your house. If you're in the house, you should wear a mask. I was watching just going off on some guy for not wearing a mask in his house around his children. He's like, really?
It's nuts. Yeah, it's nuts. I was earlier in the pandemic, I'd read the Honolulu Star Advertiser just in the same way. It's interesting to watch a car crash. This state that is so dependent on tourism, where you think that, like Nevada, that you think that the industry there could snap its fingers and bureaucrats and politicians would snap too. And they don't. And now I switched to watching some Australian news, because this country with sort of a bit of a cowboy spirit, a bit like the American West, is using its army to patrol the streets of Sydney, and it's in lockdown because of a small number of cases. And there's no end in sight. They, you know, I guess in Melbourne they now, which is it's not New South Wales, it's the other state. My knowledge of Australian states is limited, but anyway,
no.
You know, now they have like a 40-part plan to eventually end a lockdown. It's just impossible.
Look, it's one of the things when you give people power who've never had power before, they use it. You know, and we're seeing people exercise power. I still think the Carmine thing with the women, the African American women from Texas, I think that's going to be really something that we come back and really look at, because
right. And then this is the restaurant in the Upper West
restaurant
Side
in New York City
that,
basically they basically had an incident with 3 African American women. Initially, everybody said, well, it's because they weren't vaccinated. And that was just made up. It's just made up. Even the police report didn't have that. And they said there was a racial incident about it. But look what happened in the first 15 or 16 hours, 24 hours. It was essentially Texans. Texans are here. Texans. Rednecks from Texans up here doing these things. If you saw Twitter, if you saw Instagram, even the papers were like, get them, get them, get them. And then when people started finding out about it, it was, oh, well, and then they snivel away, slide away, but they're waiting to come back one more time. I mean, I'm really shocked at the lack of decency that people are treating other people with over this disease.
Yeah.
I generally wear a mask when I go out. I just do it. It's one of the things I do, but I don't wear it everywhere. In other words, like, I walked into a deli the other day. I didn't have my mask on. Nobody had a mask on. You know what I'm saying? But, I went to a doctor's office. Yeah, I put a mask on. You know what I'm saying? That's what you do because people want you to do it. But I don't understand this. I do understand it, unfortunately. I do understand people like telling other people what to do, and you give them a tool to do it with, and they're going to use that tool everywhere they can. And COVID has become a tool in every single way. And we're seeing, even in Virginia right now, Virginia's got an election this year, November, whatever, first week of November. They've already started voting. Why? Because of COVID. We have to vote.
COVID.
We need to have 45 days of voting before COVID. No, you don't. A certain ideology, the left, likes to have 45 days of voting so they can go all over the place and look for, like, my dead mother and everybody else and try to find ballots and things like that. So it's we're going to turn out they're and what's the tool? The tool for control here is COVID.
Right.
Because most people would say you don't need 45 days. Well, you have to have COVID. Oh, well, that's true. We understand that. So,
right. Well, and in addition to mailing ballots to anyone, including, the 8 people who lived in your apartment or whatever before, so you can vote their ballots, I'm convinced early elections help Democrats just because actually the media is more in charge before an election. I think as it gets very close in the final days of an election, voters start looking at the candidates directly and the media's power is diminished. But 45 days out, that bias still comes apart. I'm shifting a quick media story. Piers Morgan, the famous British opinionist and reporter, I think he has a gig with the Daily Mail in the UK. He had a gig here with CNN that did not go well. And frankly, he often came across as arrogant, smug, in favor of gun control, like to lecture Americans, although that was probably part of just being over at pointless CNN. Anyway, he's had a big resurgence. He did not buy the Meghan Markle Prince Harry self-pitying marathon that was going on there, was critical of her, said he didn't believe her when she was on Oprah, got fired because of it, but seems to have actually helped his career. Now, Murdoch land, where he has had links for a very long time, throwing a lifeline, not even a lifeline, I'd say it's more than that, or, it's not, he doesn't need one, but that he'll be coming to America again and writing for the New York Post. What do you make of that? Will that work with the Post's audience?
I think Piers Morgan has become, the guy's always had he's always had a good understanding of the arguments. I wouldn't say he picks the right arguments. I think the gun control argument, he had a very European understanding of it when he showed up with it. And I wouldn't say he evolved, but I think he understands now a little bit more about it. I've met Piers Morgan twice. I don't know him. I've just met him. You know what I'm saying? But I think, he's a typical British tabloid journalist. He's a tabloid guy. So he will be probably pretty successful. I think you'll see him on Fox. I think that's where Murdoch's going to have him, with the New York Post. Then he'll put him on Fox. And I think he'll be an incredibly effective attack dog. I think that's what he's going to be there. He's going to be he's going to be an attack dog on the left. And I think essentially, the role that some people like Steve Hilton or some of the other Brits or things like that have, I think it'll be very, very interesting to see. One of the things that's most interesting to me about the whole Murdoch group is how many senior people they have who are non-American in the group running an American media empire. I think it doesn't do them a good service in some of their publications, but I think over at Fox, for whatever reason it is, they have a unique sense of tabloid journalism in the Australian and the British press, where essentially they will push one side. American journalists are always like, well, we're non-biased. We're non-biased. Nobody in the UK, but nobody in the world believes that, you know. And everybody is like, there's nobody at the Guardian. In fairness to the Guardian, there's nobody at the Guardian that says, "Oh, we're a moderate paper." No, we're a left-wing paper. They admit it. I admire that. It's the reason why I can read the Guardian, because I know where they're coming from. But
It's funny. I've noticed that before, and I've wondered if that actually derives from a parliamentary system where you stand, about 5 feet away from your opponent and just deliver this withering, brutal assault, if at all possible. You actually have to be presentable. It's none of this, getting up on the floor of the U.S. Senate and be like, oh,
yeah,
I defer to my good friend, the senator from Massachusetts. there's
I mean,
dispensing with that.
I look. You have to understand. I think the fights are the fights, and I think you got to have them. And if you don't have them, and you try to, I wish we were more bipartisan. I don't care if you're bipartisan or not, as long as I have 2 more votes than you. I don't care. I mean, and then when you knock me out of democracy, it means that there'll be something that matters. Not these constant people trying to move around and do certain things. Look, my belief is, getting back to Piers Morgan, I think we'll probably see Piers Morgan after he gets his feet on the ground with the New York Post. I think we'll probably see Piers Morgan on Fox in a show at some time in the near term, and his instincts, basically, if I were them, I'd be targeting with Piers Morgan. I'd be targeting like educated white males, who basically can't stomach some of the Hannity and some of the other stuff like that. But and Piers Morgan will be more of an intellectual base for them. That's what I would think. Whether he gets a weekend show or whether he just becomes a regular guest all the time, we will see. But I think the one thing will be is, you're going to have to be up on your arguments if you're going to deal with him. He's not a dumb guy. I mean, that's the one thing about it. And their system turns out people. Would you have had a Reagan in a parliamentary system? I'm not sure. You certainly wouldn't have had a Trump or a Biden, if you think about it, because Trump would have been taken out by the backbenchers. All right. And Biden, you really think how long would question time with him last?
Right. Right. No, that's a great idea. I think I would watch that if Piers had a show. And I like what you say with, an attack dog. George H.W. Bush said we need a kinder and gentler America. I don't know I guess we maybe did get it, maybe not. Someone who's a little less kind and less gentle with some of the poobahs of media, of business, and of politics, then, that could go a long way.
Yeah, I mean, look, I am now part of a closed media empire, so they closed Apple Daily on us, but I got to tell you, the way we just would roll our eyes sometimes when we'd meet U.S. journalists who were like, wanted to be at all these things. My guys wanted to be outside behind the bush with a camera in their hand, you know what I'm saying, are digging through your personal records. That's how they weren't looking to make friends or looking to be part of an administration. And I think that's the way I want journalists to be, down and dirty and nasty. And it's one of the things I think, you bring guys like Piers Morgan and people like that over, so what? Who cares if they're down and dirty? The other thing too is, in fairness to Morgan, remember Glenn Beck over at CNN? Beck, they should have kept him. They should have worked hard to keep him, because basically he brought them in a different audience. You know what I'm saying? And he kind of he gentled their condition for conservatives a little bit and moderates. And it also kept him in check a little bit too. I thought it was going to be a really good mix for him. The show was doing pretty well. But what you saw is their culture there couldn't handle him. So in part, I think Piers Morgan's problem was, and this was, somebody brought this up to me, I thought it was pretty good. We think he got tossed out for the anti-gun control stuff. Maybe it's just he wasn't as far to the left as he needed to be to get covered for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's an interesting.
I mean, that's
yeah. All right. Well, I have to leave it there. That's all the time we have for this episode of Simon and White, but we'll be back again very soon with another episode. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone.